The Second World War ends not with peace, but with silence. Cities lie in ruins. Borders are redrawn with ink and blood. Across Europe, governments collapse, empires fracture, and millions wander through the wreckage of history, with no allegiance left to give. From the ashes of Berlin to the rubble of Hiroshima, a new world is forming, and it is unstable. In Washington, victory brings anxiety, not relief. The United States has emerged as an industrial and military superpower, but it knows almost nothing about the intentions of its former ally, the Soviet Union. The Red Army now occupies Eastern Europe. Stalin's influence stretches from Warsaw to Sofia. Communist parties surge in France, Italy, and Greece. The balance of power is shifting, and America is blind. During the war, the United States relied on the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. It was a hastily assembled organization of academics, lawyers, adventurers, and idealists. They parachuted behind enemy lines, sabotaged railways, gathered intelligence, and coordinated resistance movements. They were brave, but inexperienced. Compared to Soviet intelligence, they were amateurs. Moscow's networks had been operating for decades. The NKVD, soon to become the KGB, had penetrated governments, universities, labor unions, and even America's own wartime programs. British intelligence guarded secrets from Washington. The United States won the war through factories and firepower, not foresight. In April 1945, Franklin Roosevelt dies. Harry S. Truman becomes president almost overnight. Within months, the war ends. Truman, wary of secret agencies, shuts down the OSS. He believes intelligence should return to normal diplomatic channels. He is wrong. Reports flood in from Europe. Communist parties are gaining ground. Soviet troops are not leaving. American diplomats admit privately that they do not understand Moscow's strategy. The United States has unmatched military strength, but no permanent system for gathering, analyzing, and acting on global intelligence. A decision forms quietly in Washington. In 1947, behind closed doors, lawmakers pass the National Security Act. It creates the National Security Council, the Department of Defense, and a new organization unlike anything in American history, the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA is not merely an information service. Its mandate is deliberately vague. It may perform such other functions and duties related to intelligence as the National Security Council may direct. Those words are not an accident. They are a blank check. The CIA answers directly to the president. Its operations are classified. Its budget is hidden. Congress will fund it, but not oversee it closely. The public will never vote on its actions. For the first time, the United States creates a permanent peacetime spy agency, authorized to lie, bribe, sabotage, and overthrow governments in the name of national security. But power requires money. Open funding would invite scrutiny. Covert operations demand secrecy. The solution arrives in the form of Europe's devastation. By 1947, the continent is starving. Infrastructure is destroyed, factories sit idle, unemployment is rampant. Communist parties promise order, bread, and dignity. Washington fears that desperation will push Europe into Moscow's arms. President Truman announces the Truman Doctrine. The United States will support free nations resisting subjugation. Secretary of State George Marshall proposes something unprecedented, a massive economic rescue. The Marshall Plan will rebuild Europe. Officially, the program delivers food, fuel, machinery, and capital. Unofficially, it becomes the CIA's first great financial engine. A portion of the funds, quietly siphoned away, flows into intelligence accounts beyond public oversight. The money bankrolls influence operations across the continent. Political parties are funded. Labor unions are steered. Newspapers receive quiet payments. Elections are shaped before ballots are cast. Democracy is defended by manipulating it. By the early 1950s, the CIA has money, authority, and ambition. What it lacks is competence. Early operations are disasters. Agents dropped into Eastern Europe vanish within days. Networks are rolled up immediately. Radio transmissions are intercepted. Safe houses are compromised. One failure follows another, so consistent that internal reviews reach a terrifying conclusion. The The CIA has been penetrated. Soviet intelligence knows who the Americans are, where they train, and how they operate. Some CIA officers are double agents. Others are simply outmatched. Moscow plays a longer, colder game. The agency's reputation collapses. Recruitment suffers. Inside Langley, morale sinks. The CIA needs a victory. It comes in Iran. In 1951, Iran elects Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, a nationalist determined to reclaim his country's resources. He nationalizes the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, ending decades of British control. London is furious. Its economy depends on Iranian oil. Britain turns to Washington. The CIA frames the crisis as a Cold War threat. If Mossadegh remains in power, they argue, Iran could drift toward the Soviet sphere. President Eisenhower authorizes covert action. The plan is called Operation Ajax. Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, arrives in Tehran carrying suitcases of cash. The strategy is simple and ruthless. Bribe politicians, pay mobs, spread rumors, destabilize the economy, turn the military. Newspapers print stories portraying Mossadegh as unstable and corrupt. Religious leaders are paid to denounce him. Street protests erupt, some real, many manufactured. When the moment comes, army units loyal to the Shah move in. On August 19, 1953, Mossadegh is overthrown. The Shah returns to power. Western oil interests are restored. In Washington, the operation is celebrated as a masterstroke. The CIA has proven its value. It can shape history without deploying armies. But something irreversible has happened. The agency has learned that covert power works, that governments can be toppled quietly, that moral consequences can be deferred. A precedent is set. From this moment forward, the CIA will no longer see itself as a supporting instrument. It will see itself as the hidden hand. The triumph in Iran changes everything. Inside Langley, confidence replaces caution. The CIA is no longer a fragile experiment. It is now an instrument capable of reshaping nations without firing a public shot. Success brings expansion, and expansion brings momentum. In 1954, the agency turns its attention to Central America. Guatemala's president, Jacobo Arbenz, is democratically elected. He introduces land reforms that threaten the interests of the United Fruit Company, an American corporation with deep political ties in Washington. Arbenz is labeled a communist sympathizer, though his policies are moderate by global standards. The CIA constructs a narrative. Radio broadcasts beam false reports of a massive rebel army advancing on the capital. Leaflets circulate predicting imminent collapse. A small force of mercenaries, trained and armed by the CIA, crosses the border. Guatemalan military leaders, convinced resistance is futile, withdraw support from the president. Arbenz resigns. Another elected government falls without an American soldier stepping onto the battlefield. The lesson is clear. Perception can be as powerful as force. Fear, properly engineered, does the work of armies. But success breeds imitation, and imitation exposes weakness. In Indonesia, CIA-backed rebels failed to unseat President Sukarno. In Cuba, early plots to undermine Fidel Castro collapse under poor planning and local resistance. In Eastern Europe, nearly every covert insertion ends in arrest or death. The KGB remains several moves ahead. The agency adapts. If it cannot reliably place spies inside enemy states, it will watch them from above. The solution arrives through technology. In the mid-1950s, American intelligence estimates of Soviet military strength are wildly inflated. Politicians warn of bomber gaps and missile gaps. No one knows the truth. Guesswork governs policy. The CIA commissions an aircraft unlike anything built before. Designed in secrecy by Lockheed Skunk Works, the U-2 can fly higher than any interceptor, above the reach of Soviet air defenses. Its cameras photograph entire cities in exquisite detail. When the first U-2 missions return with film, panic subsides. The Soviet arsenal is real, but smaller than feared. Intelligence replaces paranoia. Until it doesn't. In 1960, a U-2 piloted by Francis Gary Powers is shot down over Soviet territory. The aircraft is no longer untouchable. Moscow parades the pilot and wreckage before the world. Diplomatic fallout is immediate. The age of invincibility ends. But the CIA's appetite for control only grows. Nowhere is that appetite more evident than in Southeast Asia. After the Geneva Accords divide Vietnam in 1954, the United States commits to defending the South. Officially, the role is advisory. Unofficially, the CIA builds a parallel war. In Laos, a country the public barely knows exists, the agency recruits and arms Hmong fighters to disrupt North Vietnamese supply lines. Air America, a CIA-owned airline, ferries weapons, operatives, and cash into jungle airstrips carved from mountainsides. The war expands invisibly. Funding becomes increasingly murky. To maintain loyalty and operational reach, the CIA tolerates and at times facilitates narcotics trafficking. Opium moves from protected regions. Heroin reaches global markets. Profits fuel covert campaigns that cannot be justified openly. In Vietnam itself, the agency launches the Phoenix program, designed to dismantle the Viet Cong's political infrastructure. Intelligence networks identify suspects. Kill teams act swiftly. Interrogations blur into torture. Thousands die. The line between counterinsurgency and terror dissolves. As the war escalates, the CIA's influence spreads beyond foreign soil. At home, the agency begins manipulating culture. Through front organizations, it funds literary journals, art exhibitions, student groups, and academic conferences. The goal is ideological containment. Liberal democracy must appear vibrant, inevitable, and morally superior. At the same time, a darker experiment unfolds. Under the code name MKUltra, CIA scientists test methods of mind control. LSD is administered to unwitting subjects. Sensory deprivation chambers isolate minds. Hypnosis, electroshock, and psychological stress are explored without consent. The objective is chilling. Can a human being be programmed? The answer remains elusive, but the damage is real. By the late 1960s, America fractures. Protest movements erupt. Trust in government collapses under the weight of Vietnam's horrors. Television broadcasts burning villages and returning body bags. The CIA, once invisible, becomes suspect. In 1970, attention shifts to South America again. Chile elects Salvador Allende, a Marxist committed to socialism through democratic means. For Washington, this is intolerable. A leftist government gaining power without revolution threatens the entire Cold War narrative. The CIA intervenes quietly. Money flows to opposition media. Strikes are encouraged. The economy is squeezed. Military contacts are cultivated. The goal is not persuasion, but pressure. On September 11th, 1973, the Chilean military moves. Fighter jets bomb the presidential palace. Allende dies inside. General Augusto Pinochet takes power. The dictatorship that follows is brutal. Torture centers operate openly. Thousands disappear. The CIA files its reports and moves on. But the world is changing. In the United States, the Watergate scandal exposes the mechanics of political deception. Trust collapses further. Congress launches investigations into intelligence abuses. The Church Committee reveals assassination plots, illegal surveillance, domestic manipulation, and MKUltra's experiments. For the first time, the CIA is dragged into the light. Reforms follow. Oversight committees are created. Executive orders ban assassinations. But the culture inside Langley does not vanish. It waits. The revelations of the 1970s do not destroy the CIA. They wound it. Congressional hearings expose assassination plots, domestic surveillance, secret prisons, and psychological experiments. For a moment, it appears the age of unchecked covert power might finally end. New oversight committees are formed. Directors testify under oath. Executive orders promise restraint. But intelligence agencies do not disappear when the world becomes uncomfortable with them. They adapt. Behind the public reforms, the CIA preserves its most important asset, deniability. Oversight limits certain methods, but not intent. Covert action does not stop. It becomes quieter, more compartmentalized, and increasingly dependent on financial complexity rather than brute force. Money becomes the new weapon. By the late 1970s, the global financial system has changed. Capital moves faster than armies. Offshore banking expands. Shell companies multiply. Jurisdictions compete for secrecy. For intelligence agencies, this is not a problem. It is an opportunity. The CIA learns to move money the way it once moved agents. In the Middle East, a storm is brewing. In 1979, Iran explodes into revolution. The Shah, long supported by the United States and protected by his brutal security services, flees the country. Ayatollah Khomeini returns from exile. An Islamic Republic is born, openly hostile to Washington. The U.S. embassy in Tehran is overrun. American diplomats are taken hostage. The humiliation is broadcast worldwide. A failed rescue mission deepens the wound. Officially, Iran becomes an enemy. Unofficially, it becomes something more complicated. In the early 1980s, the Reagan administration faces a dilemma. American hostages are being held in Lebanon by groups tied to Iran. Congress has banned funding to right-wing rebels, the Contras, fighting Nicaragua's leftist Sandinista government. The CIA and its allies search for a workaround. The solution is covert, illegal, and ingenious. Weapons are sold secretly to Iran, despite an arms embargo. The Iranians use their influence to help free American hostages. The profits from those arms sales are diverted through offshore accounts and shell companies, then funneled to the Contras. The operation bypasses Congress entirely. Drugs enter the equation. In Central America, cocaine traffickers move freely through Contra-controlled territory. Flights carrying weapons south return north with narcotics and cash. Intelligence officers look the other way. Some facilitate logistics directly. The priority is defeating communism, not enforcing the law. When the Iran-Contra scandal breaks in 1986, the fallout is explosive. Hearings dominate television. Documents vanish. Witnesses plead ignorance. Some are convicted. Others are pardoned. The CIA survives again, but Iran-Contra is not the deepest financial shadow. That distinction belongs to BCCI. The Bank of Credit and Commerce International presents itself as a global institution for emerging markets. In reality, it is a vast money laundering machine. Drug cartels, arms dealers, dictators, and terror networks all move funds through its accounts. So do intelligence agencies. BCCI's labyrinth of shell companies, false loans, and secret accounts is ideal for covert finance. Operations in Afghanistan, Africa, and the Middle East are quietly funded through its channels. Informants are paid, weapons are purchased, allies are bribed. When BCCI collapses in 1991 under coordinated international raids, investigators uncover billions in illicit transactions. The scandal touches governments across continents. Once again, consequences are limited. And then, the unthinkable happens. The Soviet Union collapses. In 1991, the red flag comes down over the Kremlin. The Cold War ends not with a battle, but with bankruptcy and disintegration. The KGB fragments. Eastern Europe pivots westward. The enemy that defined the CIA for nearly half a century disappears. For the agency, victory feels like loss. Its mission, its budget, its identity, all were forged in opposition to the Soviet threat. Without it, questions emerge. What is the CIA for in a unipolar world? In Washington, priorities shift. President Bill Clinton focuses on economic growth, globalization, and domestic reform. Intelligence budgets shrink. Overseas stations close. Veteran officers retire without replacement. Networks built over decades are dismantled. The world appears calmer. It's an illusion. In the shadows of failed states and forgotten wars, a new threat is forming. Unlike the Soviet Union, it has no borders. Unlike communist parties, it does not seek legitimacy. Its power lies in decentralization and belief. While the CIA downsizes, extremist networks expand. In Afghanistan, once a Cold War battlefield, chaos reigns. Militants trained to fight the Soviets turn their attention outward. Funding flows through charities, smugglers, and informal banking systems invisible to traditional intelligence. One man emerges as a focal point: Osama bin Laden. Throughout the 1990s, warnings accumulate. Embassy bombings, Attacks on U.S. targets. Intelligence cables circulate, incomplete and fragmented. The threat is recognized but not prioritized. The CIA is rebuilding slowly, still trapped in Cold War thinking. The world is about to remind it, brutally, that history does not end. In the 1990s, the world convinces itself that history has slowed down. Markets expand, borders soften, technology connects continents in seconds. The United States stands unchallenged, its military unmatched, its economy dominant. Intelligence agencies, built for existential rivalry, struggle to define relevance in a world that seems, briefly, at peace. But beneath the surface, the nature of conflict is mutating. In the mountains of Afghanistan, far from financial centers and political summits, extremist networks are learning a different lesson from the Cold War. They study asymmetry. They abandon territory. They replace hierarchy with cells, secrecy with anonymity, and armies with ideology. Osama bin Laden is not building a state. He is building a myth. Throughout the 1990s, Al-Qaeda grows quietly. Training camps operate under the protection of the Taliban. Fighters move across borders with ease. Money flows through charities, informal banking systems, and smuggling routes invisible to conventional intelligence. Warnings reach Washington. The bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998 kill hundreds. The attack on the USS Cole in 2000 nearly sinks a warship in its own harbor. Each incident is investigated, cataloged, and filed. But the threat does not fit old models. The CIA, downsized and reorganized after the Cold War, struggles to adapt. Human intelligence networks are thin. Bureaucratic friction slows analysis. Opportunities to kill or capture bin Laden appear, then vanish amid legal hesitation and political caution. Then, on a clear September morning in 2001, the illusion of distance collapses. Commercial airplanes become weapons. The World Trade Center burns and falls. The Pentagon is struck. Nearly 3,000 people die in hours. The attacks are broadcast live, repeating endlessly, searing themselves into collective memory. For the CIA, this is failure on a historic scale. The response is immediate and absolute. The agency is given extraordinary authority. Budgets explode. Legal constraints loosen. The mission is simple. Find the enemy, dismantle the network, and prevent the next attack at any cost. Afghanistan becomes the first battlefield. CIA teams arrive before conventional forces, linking up with local militias, calling in airstrikes, directing the collapse of the Taliban regime. Al-Qaeda scatters, but the war does not end. In 2003, the focus shifts to Iraq. Intelligence assessments claim Saddam Hussein possesses weapons of mass destruction. Satellite imagery, defectors, and intercepted communications appear to confirm the threat. They are wrong. The invasion topples Saddam's regime quickly, but no weapons are found. The intelligence failure becomes undeniable. Trust erodes again, but the damage is already done. Iraq fractures. Insurgencies rise. Sectarian violence explodes. The CIA finds itself operating in a vast, chaotic theater, where every street is contested and every alliance temporary. Out of this chaos, a new doctrine emerges. If enemies cannot be reliably captured, they will be eliminated remotely. The drone becomes the CIA's signature weapon. Unmanned aerial vehicles, equipped with high-resolution cameras and precision missiles, allow constant surveillance and instantaneous strike capability. Operators sit continents away, watching targets for days, even weeks, before acting. The battlefield has no borders. In Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and beyond, names are added to kill lists. Compounds are reduced to rubble. Convoys vanish in fire. The program is efficient, deniable, and deeply controversial. Supporters call it precision warfare. Critics call it assassination. For the CIA, it is evolution. In 2010, a decade-long hunt reaches its climax. Analysts identify a mysterious compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan. No phones, no internet, unusual security. Patterns point to a single conclusion. Osama bin Laden is inside. A decision is made. Navy SEAL Team 6 crosses into Pakistan without permission. Helicopters slip through the night. The compound is breached. Minutes later, the world's most wanted man is dead. The mission is a triumph of intelligence persistence. But it is not an ending. Terrorism fragments, Al-Qaeda splinters, new groups emerge, faster, more decentralized, harder to predict. The challenge shifts from hunting leaders to anticipating behavior. Data becomes the new terrain. The CIA turns increasingly to technology. Artificial intelligence, pattern recognition, and predictive analytics redefine intelligence work. Partnerships with Silicon Valley deepen. Vast datasets, financial records, travel logs, communications metadata are fused into unified systems. Software maps human networks the way satellites map terrain. The agency no longer just observes the world. It models it. Today, the CIA operates in an environment of unprecedented complexity. Rival powers like China deploy surveillance on a civilizational scale. Cyber warfare blurs the line between peace and conflict. Influence campaigns move faster than verification. The tools are more powerful than ever. So are the risks. From its birth in secrecy to its mastery of technology, the CIA has shaped history in ways few institutions ever have. It has defended interests, toppled governments, enabled atrocities, prevented attacks, and failed catastrophically. It exists in contradiction. In a world where information is power, the CIA remains its most hidden broker. But as systems grow more interconnected and fragile, the margin for error shrinks. The question is no longer whether intelligence can shape the future. It is whether it can survive the consequences of doing so.